This is Noah Dyer, and you're listening to the Minutemen.
You're listening to the Minutemen, Arizona's independent political talk show.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Minutemen. This is your host, CT Rob, with CT Steve.
Hello, guys.
And the Squid.
Howdy, howdy, howdy.
And we're with a man, not just any man. He is a man leading the rebellion, leading the cause against the evil empire of Big Double D, Doug Ducey, Governor Hopeful, Noah Dyer. Noah, thank you for sitting with us today.
Thanks for having me, guys. Excited to be here.
So, Noah, how's the campaign been so far?
The campaign has been amazing. It has been incredibly intense. And I suppose probably any candidate feels the way I do, which is I'm super excited. I'm much farther along at this point than I thought I would be. But of course, I also wish I was even farther along than I am. So, it's a year and a half. We got a long way to go, but I'm super pleased at the progress we've been making.
You know, when I speak to people about you, I'm like, yeah, Noah Dyer, man, he's the guy standing on the side of the road with the sign saying, I'm running for governor right here. No big campaign contributions, all that. That's why I tell people they need to get behind you. But how's the connection going between you, the Dems, the independents here in Arizona? I mean, you getting a lot of traction with people?
I am getting a lot of traction with people, and I'll dive in a little bit. We can talk more about kind of that multi-party or non-party appeal. But as far as the Democrats go specifically, it's been a mixed bag. I'll say mostly good, because most Democrats are people, right? They're just like everybody else. They have jobs, they have things to do. They're not thinking about politics 24/7. And when I talk to somebody just on the street or on the light rail or in an Uber or whatever, I get a ton of positive feedback, and they're excited about my campaign, and they say they're going to vote for me. And even among the activists, the grassroots activists, and the people that are running, nonprofits and political action committees, I'm getting a lot of support there as well. One area where I've struggled to gain support is from what you might call the party elites or the kingmakers or
the corporate Dems.
Yeah, I don't want to be insulting to them per se, because I understand that I've got to prove myself and that they're waiting for me to do that. But I think that they ought to be looking at me maybe more closely than some of them are. So anyhow, that's the one area of struggle, but I think it'll be coming through here.
Right. So just on a personal level, like, how have you been? Like, how's it been since the last time we've talked? How's your campaign been going on? And how's it just been for you personally?
It's a very interesting question. It has been. I am fortunate to say that I get a lot of energy from conversing with people and hearing their thoughts and having them share back me, standing up in front of people and seeing people get excited about the movement. So it's simultaneously been draining, but it puts its own energy back in. So it feels really good. It's changed my life almost completely, I would say. I barely have any nights to myself anymore. I used to enjoy, relaxing by playing video games for a few hours sometimes or whatever else. And, that's pretty much gone.
Hitting the ground running. Yeah.
So I still do try and make some time to refresh and reconnect and make sure that people in my life know that I love them and I care about them. But certainly, finding that balance while also trying to convince, the 6 million residents of Arizona that I'm the best choice for governor is a new challenge that I've never faced before.
It's a definite grind that you got to keep on. It's, the more you keep pressing the people in a positive light, as you're saying, because you get that natural reaction, and you get that natural feeling. I'm guessing. I obviously am not running, but you get that feeling like, okay, hey, I'm conversing with this person, and I feel what they're going through, and they're feeling what I'm going through, obviously, with the information that's out now, and you're gathering that with the people. That's nice, but you're a man, and you do get tired at points. So
yes, you do. Right? So fortunately, I don't have to go golfing every single weekend. I don't need that much.
But what about when you're in office? That's what counts.
When I'm in office, maybe I'll have to start. So, I've been able to take care of myself, while still pushing very hard on the campaign trail. But, even small things like yesterday, I was down in Sierra Vista, so I was down in southern Arizona, which, had I not been on the campaign, I certainly would not have been there. But I was working a fair with some great, I was invited down there, talking about my relationship with the Democratic Party. The Cochise County Democrats, dropped me an email and said, hey, we're having this event. We'd love you to come down. So, that was good. And I have a lot of experiences like that. But why I mention that is because, we were working the street fair and there was this group of people that I could tell were young. And I said, hey, are any of you 18? And there was one 18-year-old in the mix, and they hadn't yet registered to vote, so we got people to register to vote.
Nice.
And that's an example of a really small thing, but it's one of those things that you take satisfaction as registering new voters. I've done a lot of canvassing with Democrats, and the party does lots of things besides just politics. We collect canned food for food shelters and things like that. So there's been a lot of satisfaction that way.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and move on to a little bit of current events. What did you think of the current, as you know, the Republicans just passed the Trump Care or Obama replacement bill, whatever you want to call it, a horrible piece of legislation. Yeah. Do you have anything you wanted to comment on? I mean, well, I should say, as governor, would you opt out for the state to opt out of the health insurance for pre-existing conditions?
Oh, that's an so certainly I would not try and make the plan any worse. I would fully opt into anything that they gave. As thinking about it from a governor's perspective, fortunately, right now it's still speculation, right? Because most people still don't really know what the bill is. We're still kind of talking about
there's not even a CBO report. CBO
we're still kind of talking about the last bill, right? Like, we don't think it's that different from the last bill, so we assume it's bad, and I think we're right to assume that it's bad. But I have seen some L.A. Times and New York Times articles parsing that out a little bit, and certainly it looks bad. But senators have seemed very skeptical of it. Even Republican senators have not been like, oh, I'm so excited to get this and pass this, right? They're all like, I have no idea what this is and how I'll be voting on it.
I'm so excited to kick 24 million people off healthcare. I don't know about you guys. You guys ready?
Right. So, even Republican senators don't seem that excited about it. And so all I can say is it probably either won't pass the Senate, or if it does, it'll be changed. And if it doesn't, then I'll have a lot clearer opinion about what, as a state, how I would respond to that as governor. The bottom line of it being, not only do we not want to kick our citizens off of the insurance they have, but we want to make it more robust than it is. And whatever tactics would be necessary to achieve that goal are things that I would be advocating for.
Well, here's another fact on this healthcare bill. Obviously people are a little upset just because no one is basically coming out and explaining this new bill, and they're actually cutting things out of their fact directions on their website, cutting things that they promised. Now they're not promising it, and now they said they might promise it in the future. There's a lot of uncertainties and irregularities right now with them, and people just, the regular people are like, well, just explain this to me so I can understand what's going on. And pretty much there's 217 GOPers, and not one wants to discuss this fact. Just on that fact, how do you, since you're basically lack of a better term, I should say, shrugging shoulders with the citizens right now, how do you feel about that, running for governor and
well, I think that's
dealing with something like
quite
that?
Frankly, I think it's wrong. You can vote. You probably ought to read something that you're going to vote for. And people may call me a political neophyte for saying something like that, but I happen to think that if your job is passing legislation, that you probably should read it and not rely on staffers or groups of different people to read different parts of it and kind of assimilate it to you. But even if we accept that, okay, you need help reading legislation, Noah, you've never been a representative, so you don't know what it's like.
What are you talking about?
Sure. So, okay, fine. You don't have to read it yourself, but I think you have to understand it. And to what you guys are saying, they don't even understand it and can't explain it.
Right.
And what's bothersome about that is, like, okay, a bill gets introduced and not everyone can explain it, but to vote and to pass it is craziness to me.
I went on Twitter and I said that this was a vote more of pride than it was for country. Because, I mean, come on. The reason they needed to repeal Obamacare was because many of them built their campaigns off, we're going to repeal Obamacare. And they've just lied so much. And then, a lot of people are finally waking up and saying, I like a lot of the benefits of the ACA. But now, they have to do a 180 because they're like, well, we built this whole campaign off repealing Obamacare. We have to do it.
And then what did they do? They basically went out and they were bragging. You had Donald Trump's basically, hey, I'm the president now. So, I mean, no one believed in me, but we did it. You know what I mean? Like, they said we needed a long time, but we did it in a couple months. So it's that bragging type of notion that scares people. I think you would kind of agree, right? No, I mean, just that sense of, like, you have these world leaders basically going out acting like children, like they just won a track race, and they're rubbing it into the loser's face. That's all fine and dandy, but it's like, when this is billions of Americans' lives that are on the line here, that's troubling to see.
It is. And honestly, I do want to talk about Trump a little bit, because I think...
Oh, no problem. We talk about Trump all the time.
we definitely do. I think that we have been playing that wrong. People who oppose Trump's policies have largely been playing that wrong. We know that Trump is a man of ego. He wants to be seen as powerful, and he wants to be seen as smart, and he wants to be loved by the people, right? And so when Trump didn't pass health care the first time, I think the right political strategy would have been to say, well, first of all, let's talk about what happened. Not only did Republicans come out and say, we couldn't get stuff done, whatever. But the Democrats, instead of saying, thank God, Trump didn't, instead of saying, like, Trump, we appreciate you, for not getting everyone together and passing this, right? Like, had we massaged him and said, like, good on you. Like, you told the American people you were going to keep them on healthcare, and that's what's happened.
Healthcare for everybody.
Healthcare for everybody. That's what's happened. Okay, but instead I say we, the media and the people and the politicians all came out and said, Trump, you're weak. You can't get anything done. Like, you thought you were going to come here and change everything, and you can't. Like, right?
Yeah.
And so for them now to ram this thing through without reading it and go out and go, like, it's a perfect. It is not a mature response, but it is a human response. And I think politics is a human game. And I think that if people who oppose Trump start using his vanity and his ego as a tool to get what they want, as opposed to constantly using it to provoke him to fight against them, that would be wise.
Like the Bernie Sanders way. Is like when Bernie Sanders, he stood up in front of the Senate and held one of his tweets and said, this is what Donald Trump said he wanted to do, and this is exactly what he's not doing. Yeah,
I mean, I love me some Bernie Sanders. I'm a huge fan of Bernie Sanders. Again, it's not inaccurate, but it's calling Trump a liar, right? So
using his words against them.
It is. So I think, again, a policy Trump recognizes. We know that he recognizes from his words to the Australian Prime Minister, from his words on the campaign trail. We know that he recognizes that people are not going to like him if they get knocked off of healthcare. And so he's balancing that. He thinks, okay, if I want the people to love me, I need to keep healthcare. And if anything, get more people on it. On the other hand, he thinks, if I want people to love me, I have to do what I said. And so he's got to make a choice, right? He can't win both of those arguments. He's either going to have to keep people on healthcare, or he's going to have to do what he said, since he can't do both. And I don't think Democrats have played getting him to keep healthcare as good as they could. I think they provoked him to make it feel like he needed to choose.
That's interesting.
I'm going to interject here. I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate.
Yeah.
But if we go back to when Obama was in office, Republicans did basically the same thing with him, with trying to turn everything he's planned to something awful, and now it's the Democrats doing it to Trump now.
Absolutely.
I mean, to me, the Senate is just or if you can't do this our way, you're not going to be able to do it. And I mean, there needs to be a change. And I don't.
The party politics have to change. The whole "my team can do no wrong" has to change. It really does. The whole compromising has to. I mean, that's the whole point of when we is compromise. You have to compromise. And the Dems, like I don't know if you saw the Jimmy Kimmel, but what Jimmy Kimmel said was absolutely right. It's not a partisan issue. It's not. It's people's lives. You're not buying a car. You're not buying a package. You're talking about someone's life. Like you said, I've been in that situation with children. With my son was born early, and I had to see him and those tubes and everything like that. And yeah, it breaks my heart. And you see things that happen. You're like, no, money should not mean anything when it comes to your kids whatsoever. And that's why I stand for single payer and everything like that. But no, I absolutely agree with you on the sense that the Dems were doing nothing but provoking him. I do absolutely agree with that. They should have been working with him. I do agree with that. And I think that is and there's also kind of a civil war brewing on the left between the far left progressives and the moderate Democrats right now, and it just seems like there's no unity towards anything. And that's a really interesting perspective because I've actually never heard that before on the idea that they're kind of just provoking him like that. It's really interesting.
Like I said, things are broken. Obviously, my campaign is about change, and it's about doing politics differently. And so, I'm probably a fairly unique person. I have no love for Trump or his policies, but I think, he's the president right now. That's the person you got to work with, and you ought to understand that person's psychology and use it to your favor as much as you can. And I think what Squid was saying earlier also resonates, about the hypocrisy, and it goes both ways, right? Like
awful.
But here's something that's just obvious, right? Democrats constantly complained about attacks on Obama's race and color, right? Correctly so. Yeah. So absolutely. But since Donald Trump has been elected, I can't tell you how many Cheeto and Chief Cheeto, the Oompa Loompa, the Orange County, we're attacking him based on color, and I'm like, what the heck is going on, right? So the hypocrisy is real. It's real at the individual level, it's real, at the ground, at the bottom. It's real with the voters. It's real with the activists. It's real with politicians. It's real with party leaders. It's real all the way through. And hypocrisy, if it was getting stuff done, then I would say, all right, if hypocrisy is a strategy that works, then do it. But calling the president a Cheeto and it is not actually advancing any of our policies. And I think the biggest fear that I have for 2018 is that it's a repeat of 2016. But what's changing is the quantity of people, but what's not changing is the strategy. It's still anti-Trump.
Yes.
And you can't run on anti-Trump again. You would think that you would learn that lesson.
Yeah.
But
policies have to drive it forward. They really do at this point.
And I know being anti-Trump is policy, right? Saying we want health care for all is a policy. Saying we don't think that churches should be able to make political speech.
That is ridiculous. Sorry, but don't even get me. That is ridiculous.
These are all policy things. But if you approach them policy first, as opposed to approach them as ad hominem attacks on Donald Trump, I think you'd get some more mileage out of that.
But let me play devil's advocate too.
Hit it.
But his supporters don't care. I mean, he could literally say anything. I mean, and I heard Bill Maher say this, I think the best. There's such a disconnect, no matter how much our policies as liberals, because I hear a lot of conservatives say the one things I hate the most is I have my college debt. It's like, then why do you vote for conservatives that don't even do anything about the college debt? And you see a guy saying we want to erase the college debt, but you still vote for that guy. It's it's the party mentality of I'm Republican, I have to vote Republican. So I just want to say, do you think that disconnect is starting to diminish away, or do you think it's going to get worse if the Dems keep going the way they're going?
I think there's a lot of things that go on there, but the thing is, that goes both ways. So I would love to say Republicans are the only people who don't call their politicians out, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I want to take something, kind of subtle or whatever. So the golf thing, right? So Donald Trump very clearly said, I wouldn't golf. I'd be
wouldn't
doing
take
my
a
job.
vacation,
He
yeah.
said it over and over again. I wouldn't take a vacation. I wouldn't.
No vacation.
Okay, so the objective reality of what Trump said is well established. So if you're a Democrat, you say, Donald Trump, you are a liar. You said a thing and you didn't do it. Blah, blah, blah. If you're a Republican, you say, Donald Trump has been working through golf his whole life. The man's business is golf. And when he's on the golf course,
he's doing business.
He's doing business. He's making deals for our country. You say, and by the way, the job's a stressful job, so it's perfectly reasonable that the guy needs to relax. Right? And so you're cutting him some slack because you're on his side and you agree with his policies. As many people as are upset about healthcare, like there are people who think like good, right? Like there are Republicans who also are excited about policies as well.
When you frame it in the sense of I shouldn't have to pay for someone else's healthcare. When you frame it, and that's what they usually frame it as, is like, who wants to pay for somebody else's healthcare? That's what I hear the most. And it's like, you do know though it pays more later on. It creates jobs. It's beneficial for you, anybody. And most of the time I find people that say that are people that are perfectly healthy and nothing's happened to them yet. Like, but when something does, people don't even realize it's like $100,000 for some medical procedures.
Fortunately, Bernie Sanders and others have plans. In economics, if I get geeky here for a second, there's a principle called price discrimination.
Yeah.
It happens both in healthcare and in university. It happens everywhere, right? Like the reason that lunch menus are cheaper around, if you go and eat a business lunch somewhere and they give you a lunch menu instead of the dinner menu, it's not because food is cheaper during lunchtime. It's because they think you're willing to pay less for lunch, so they charge. It's purely based on their observation of your willingness, right? The same is true with universities. So universities jack up tuitions really high, and then they ask you for all kinds of documents so that they can see how much income you have, and then based on that, they're going to charge you only as much as you're willing to pay, right? Or as they think you should be willing to pay, and that's called price discrimination. It's it's a name that sounds bad. If you're a business trying to make the most money you can, you don't think it's bad. If you're a buyer, though, and you have lots of resources, you do think it's bad. So when it comes to healthcare, prescription drugs are priced based on price discrimination. And that is to say that a person in America, whether or not they have insurance and whether that's publicly funded or not, is willing to pay this much money in order to stay alive or not feel depressed or whatever issue they're confronting, right? And so they charge not as much as it costs them to make, not as much as a reasonable profit would be. They charge as much as you're willing to pay. Yeah. It's how drugs are priced. It's how other things are priced. But we know that in other nations that aren't willing to pay that much,
they put a cap on that.
They don't pay that much.
Yeah.
So
it's like $200 for an EpiPen here in Canada. I think it's like $40 or so. Yeah.
All this sort of stuff. So we have told the medical sector through our policies, we are willing to bend over for you, charge us what you want, and we'll pay the bill. And Bernie Sanders and other progressive Democrats have said, like, look, if we just tell the pharmaceutical industry and the medical that if we just set the law, like we're not going to pay that much.
We set the standard, yeah.
Yes, then we won't pay that much. It's that simple.
You try explaining that to them. It's when you try to converse with them, it's like it's like hitting your head against the wall, literally.
The thing about we don't live in a free market, and therefore free market economics doesn't work. Precise. I don't mean to say entirely there should be no element of free market economics, but when you have controls in place that let people overcharge, like that's not a free market. That is a seller-centric market.
Yeah, I absolutely.
So that's the problem.
I mean, so you're basically saying we shouldn't privatize everything, because that seems to be the notation right now for the Republic. Let's privatize education. Let's privatize healthcare. Let's privatize everything across the board and just cut it, make it bare bones, wild west.
Right. I mean, education in Arizona is another place where
I was going to get to that
people
with you,
are
I'm sure you're on
trumping
fire.
free market ideas, but it's not a free market,
The voucher system.
and the voucher system,
Yeah.
and the tax credit system, and the charter school system. I mean, so with our public schools, we require our public schools not only to provide education, but to provide busing and free lunch and sometimes after school programs and special ed and learning modifications based on every individual in the classroom and all these sorts of things. So, and for that, we pay a particular amount of money per head. It's about $7,500, right? Well, charter schools, we pay that same amount of money per head, and we don't want those services. They don't have to bus people. They don't have to provide lunch. They don't even have to provide playground.
They don't have to
equipment or
provide
field.
what they're spending that money on necessarily.
True, right? So they have to provide a budget, but then they don't have to provide what they actually spend it on. And the idea, which would be nice if it was real, the idea is that extra money that's not going in to school lunch. It wouldn't even be that nice, but if we can pretend for a second that the money that isn't going into school lunch and isn't going into busing and isn't going to special ed is going into the educational system, and it's making these kids' education better, and teachers are getting paid more, and schools have better equipment, and they're kept up better, and everything's great, and that's what that money that doesn't go to free lunch is used for. But it doesn't. It goes into people's pockets, and in fact, they're providing less service. And you have individuals making more money and not teachers making more money, not even school administrators making more money. You have charter school owners making more money, and that's not a free market. That is a seller side advantage, and it's not cool.
That is, in layman's terms, that's a straight hustle.
That is a hustle. Yeah,
but the thing about it, you're hitting that nail on the head there, because so much of these children nowadays are not only not graduating, but they are dropping out at an alarming rate. There's a staggering amount. There's like a 35% rate that freshmen are just dropping out before their year is even over in high school. That's crazy. Back when I was going to school, that wasn't like an issue. I mean, people were dropping out, but it was usually around right at the end where they just were getting tired or whatever. But to drop out 3 months in, or you don't even make it to high school, and it's just, some of them were just like, they just can't keep up with the learning experiences that they get in high school because of their educational factors that they've got in middle school or grade school or where they went. It's alarming because, and also the factor of all these teachers right now. It's May 7th today, so we're in Arizona. It's about to be summertime. There's a lot of kids right now graduating as we speak. There's been a ton of graduations, but there's also been the middle school kids that are making their way to high school. So there's a transition for these teachers that they don't get paid in the summertime. So they're stranded. They're not making as much money as they should be. So now they're going to go throughout another 2.5 months, 3 months for others, with no pay. They're bitter as all hell, and they're looking for solutions, and no one wants to hear them out. And they feel like their hands are tied behind their backs, and they have nowhere else to go. And this is a career that they've chosen, not their profession, not just a job, but a profession, and teaching. And it's a liable career, but in this day and age, is it really just another job that you can do? What's the difference between a teacher's assistant today than somebody, forgive me, but for somebody who's working at a fast food restaurant or working at a lobby store or something like that? It's basically they're getting the same rate of pay.
Yeah.
And but one of them is doing more than the other one. No criticisms aside there. I'm not trying to label anybody of anything here, but it's just facts. People, when they choose a career like that and they basically are being handcuffed before they even receive their diploma for teaching, that is a gigantic problem, and it just puts a damper on all of the teaching. So you're losing a lot of teachers. Not only that, but you're having a lot of these children that aren't being taught the same way as somebody else who would be in a public school or a private school, of that matter. And so when they get to these educational factors such as pre-algebra, or they get into college ed before they want to get to college, it's unfathomable for these children, so they just give up.
There's a couple of things. So first off, I want to say I'm passionate about education. Our governor and our legislature At least the Republicans in the legislature have let down people when it comes to it. They've made promises and not done it. I do want to talk about some of the things that you've said, just to make sure that I was a teacher for several years, and then a college professor. Many people in my family are still teaching. My dad is a teacher, my aunt is a teacher, and I talk to people about what's going on. And there's two kinds of changes that we can make in education. First off, I don't think the problem about high school dropouts is necessarily a new problem. I went to Central High School, and I remember the stat. You had about 800 freshmen start, and your sophomore class was almost half of that, and most of those people stayed until the end of senior year. So high freshman dropout rates, at least I have my 20-year reunion next year. So 20 years ago, that was a thing that we were dealing with.
Hi, I'm Noah. I'm running for governor now.
Right. So that was why I ran. It's because I didn't want to be embarrassed.
You're like, yeah, guys, I'm running for governor. What are you guys doing? Nice.
So that problem has been around, and so in the teacher pay problem it's real as well. We are last, and we're last by a large amount. We can give our teachers a pretty fat raise and still be very much last.
There's going to be a ton of people that are going to love to hear that from you.
And I'm for that. But I want to be clear about this. Giving teachers a raise, there's no way to dice it other than it requires a straight up tax increase. That is what has to happen if you want to give teachers more money. I support that. I think we should do it. But I also can't pretend like you can like straight up eliminate the Department of Corrections, free all the prisoners, and take all that money and give it to teachers, and it's still not enough to pay for the raise they deserve.
Plus all the criminals running around.
And plus you have criminals running around.
Nah, I get you.
There's no place to give teachers that raise without raising taxes. I do support that. I think the phrase, we're selling the state too cheaply is a true statement, and we do have to raise taxes in order to give our teachers a raise, but I'm supportive of that. But even if there weren't the political will to do that, there are lots of things that we can do to improve our educational system and improve our teacher quality of life that don't involve a raise. One of the things that you mentioned is, teachers not getting paid throughout the summer. I just, for the listeners, as a rule, that's not, they either they keep getting paid through the summer. They have an option. Either they keep getting paid through the summer, or they get a lump sum check. They get, like 5 or 6 G's in a single check compared to the 1,500 they usually get, or, whatever it is. So teachers don't have to starve through the summer. They also aren't buying boats or doing stuff like that. And many of them are taking second jobs, and they do get paid too little. All those things are true. I just don't want to act like, they've got their crappy salary throughout the year, and that's exacerbated during summer. So that being said, the quality of life changes that we can make for teachers, Republicans are all about regulation kills business, right?
Oh, yeah. We got to pollute the lake.
Right. If you want to do business, you got to be able to do what you want in the environment. You want. You got to be able to do what you want.
Doesn't matter.
You got to be able to do what you want.
Forest gone. Water gone. Endangered species? Nah.
Right. So they have that belief. And yet, when it comes to teachers are super duper hyper regulated. And that does kill classroom innovation, and it does kill teacher motivation. So if we are not, in the environment that teachers exist in, where they're not getting paid that much, and they're not appreciated for their qualifications and the hard work they do, and all of these things, the very least we could do is not make their lives as much about paperwork as it is about teaching kids.
I think that's a great point.
And so, anyhow, I'll talk about education all day. You guys, we can come
right? Yeah,
show about education.
I was gonna be like, I can, because I also am. I wouldn't say I'm a former teacher, but I was a former teacher's assistant. And I tutored almost, my goodness, 10 years ago. But nice. We could discuss this forever, but we're not gonna go there. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head there too. Again, they do have options. But what my point is, what I'm trying to stress is they feel limited because, again, they don't feel like they're being heard enough. And they obviously are being grossly underpaid, staggeringly. My mother's a teacher. My sister is a teacher. It's just when I hear all these stories from other people that want to get in because they graduate from college and that's their life.
Yeah.
They go into this profession. Again, I want to stress that's a profession. That's a career.
Yeah.
And that's how, troubling is to hear that. You go into your career, you're being set for life, and it's just you see someone else being paid more than you. And, that's so bad. And just like you said, that morale is just down the tubes because what they're thinking about is more paperwork and less about their children's or their classrooms that they're teaching, less about the children that are paying attention and them focusing on that. It's really bad. But I just wanted to agree on that fact that it's a big troubling issue that needs to be looked at. But again, we're in this age where it's a blurred line.
The issue is, talking about compensation. The issue, it's in Arizona, it's nationwide, it's even worldwide, and that is the concentration of wealth in the hands of a very few people.
Oh, yeah.
And if we talk about that with knowing that the point that I'm making it to is teachers here. Median income in Arizona is about $65,000 per family. So a two-earner household or a potential two-earner household makes on average about $65,000 a year. So, and when I say on average, I mean 50% of Arizonans' families deal with less than that. We ask them to deal with either exactly that amount or less. If we distributed Arizona's wealth evenly, which I'm not actually and literally suggesting we do, but if
you commie.
Yeah, right. If we did, every family would have over $90,000 to deal with. And the reason it's not that way is not because immigrants are taking our jobs or anything like that. It's because the wealthy are taking more and more and more of the wealth. So I mentioned that number $65,000 for this reason. Two teachers, a household that had two teachers in it, would make more than that. They'd make closer to 80 grand, right? Two averagely paid teachers. So not only are we not asking, if you just think about that for a minute, that means that what are we asking other people to live on, right? Like if teachers are struggling and a family, husband and wife, or whatever, two teachers living together are making more than the average household, then the average household is really, really struggling. And I think it's important that we address our issue with poverty, and that this teacher solution can be simultaneously addressed as that. I think just pulling teachers out of poverty as a special group without addressing the fact that there are a lot of other people and a lot of other professions that are in that is doing a disservice to the issue, which is wealth inequality.
Yeah.
And
I agree. So as you know, we just had the French elections and Le Pen was defeated. I don't really want to get your opinion too much on the French elections, being that we're American here. But I wanted to get your opinion on what do you think is going on with this wave of right-wing, I don't want to call it extreme. I guess you could say some of it's extreme, but this wave that we're seeing across Europe, we've already kind of experienced it here. We saw Brexit. What do you think is going on? Do you think that people are just do you think the empathy for not feeling, putting themselves in another person's shoes, like with the immigrants, is the issue? I mean, what do you think is going on? Why do you think people are starting to turn more towards the right-wing extremists, like immigrants are bad, I don't want health care for everybody?
The honest to goodness truth is that is starting to hit people's pocketbooks. Like, it's nice to say, we love immigrants, we love people all over the world and whatever. But the starving children in Africa, people can ignore that, right? Like they don't have to address that with their own money, or they feel really good about giving $1 a day so that one kid can have meals or whatever it is. What's going on in the Middle East and in Northern Africa is sending tons of people into other countries, and other countries or the people in those countries are having to ask themselves, do we want to pick up the slack? Do we want to help?
Yeah.
And we would all love to think that humans all over the world are willing to give up some of their resources to help out other people. But honestly, we're not even wired that way. I mean, humans, animals, just the whole sequence of life is about getting more resources for yourself and your line and whatever. So, I mean, if you read books about, our political brains and how we think and like why conservatism is a thing and why aren't we all just liberals?
I love that. Why is it a thing?
Right? It's evolutionarily based. And so for people to see seas of refugees and immigrants coming into their country, like they are right to identify that as a thing that is going to lower temporarily their country's output. And there are voices within it, just like there's voices within a people. Like when a homeless guy asks you on the street for $10, like you got to ask yourself, right? You got two voices in your head. Yeah. Like, am I going to give this guy either some food or some money, or am I just going to walk on, right? And as political bodies, as cities and states, or individuals, families, cities, states, nations, we ask ourselves these same questions. And it's perfectly rational that there is going to be a significant body of people who are saying, we got to take care of ourselves. We can't take care of the world.
Yeah.
It makes me happy when that side doesn't win, because ultimately I think that's our better nature, that we are humans.
Absolutely.
And that we should triumph over that. But I do not attack people for having that feeling or for recognizing the reality of what mass immigration does to a place. Yeah. It temporarily makes it so that not everybody can have what they always had. Resources are finite. We love, there's a big myth that goes around that resources are like unlimited. They're just abundant. Like if you work hard, resources just like appear before you and you get to harvest them. And if you don't have them, it's because you aren't making resources magically appear. But that's not the earth that we actually live in. The earth that we actually live in only makes so much stuff, and we only have so much talent for harvesting that stuff.
Are you sure the world's not flat? Because I hear that a lot nowadays.
and so there are choices that have to be made. And so I am glad. I was sad when America made the choice that made it sound like, hey, we're America first. That was literally like all over the WhiteHouse.gov. America first. We're number 111.
Y'all make America great.
And I was sad when Britain made the choice and said, Britain number 1. We ain't going to let the EU drag us down. But I am proud of France for having seen those two choices and seen where things are going. They stood up and, a vast majority of them said, that's not how we're going to be.
That's not how we're going to be.
And again, lest it sound otherwise, I'm not an America hater. I'm not a Britain hater. I'm just saluting the voters of France. I'm not trying to say, I wish I lived there.
France takes a lot of stuff, man. I'll tell you that. Yeah. They're winning right now.
Yeah, exactly. So usually, freedom fries instead of French fries and all that other stuff.
That was ridiculous.
So right now, I will proudly go and eat some French fries because France decided to side with their humanity instead of siding with their individualism.
Well, one of the things I was thinking, guys, I want to hear you guys' opinion on this. Do you think, and this was happening before the French election, and I was actually going to talk about this a little bit, because what they were doing with Le Pen is they were associating Le Pen a lot with Donald Trump, like a female version of Donald Trump. They would have her picture on walls with like Trump's face over it. And I know you were saying it's kind of like, the Democrats are going about it the wrong way, but do you think that kind of worked? Do you guys think that worked in a way to basically placate, like, look what's going on in America. This chick is like a female Donald Trump. We shouldn't vote for her. Because, I mean, she lost overwhelmingly. It was like 61-34.
Go ahead. I think.
I'm going to jump in there with what you're adding there too. And I don't know if you saw this, but hackers hacked her opponent and released like a
Monroe.
Yeah, or I can never remember his last name, but they released like a bunch of his emails. And to
Where did we see that?
I saw that, but to me, I mean, I think that didn't sway voters. I think they saw that he was going to be the better choice because. I mean, let's be honest. The French have seen what's been going on over here.
Yeah, they saw Brexit. They saw.
And when they saw what we're dealing with Trump and how you were just saying, they're saying she's the female version of Donald Trump, and they didn't want that.
Well, Donald Trump even endorsed her.
Yeah,
he went out and endorsed her too, which was insane.
I think that's kind of what led to her downfall with
it
this.
could have been a nail.
Yeah,
Could have been a nail in the coffin.
I guess I'll say a couple things about that. Unfortunately, we were talking a little, we've been talking about how humans are wired, right?
Yeah.
We do make decisions emotionally, and therefore campaigning has to be emotional, and sometimes that is about people.
Make America great.
Right? So I think that tapping into people's emotions, again, you can do that for any purpose, right? You can use emotions for good, and you can use emotions for bad. I went to church service this morning, and I've said before I'm not a religious person, and I'm not. But it was very emotional. They made me cry, but they made me cry because I want to do good things, right? Instead of making me cry,
they're like,
thinking right. So even if you don't agree with the facts that people are putting forward with their emotional argument, if you agree with it in spirit, what they're trying to get at, and if you're moved to take action on that, that can be good. And so I guess all I say is the fact that people in France were able to use Donald Trump and what's happened in Britain and what's happened here in the U.S. To tap into people emotionally and bring out their better nature, I understand that and I support it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually really happy too, because there's just been this wave of extremism that's been really kind of going all over Europe. Yeah. All right, guys, we'll be right back.
They took the lights down low, in shadows hiding from the world, only coming out when it gets cold. The seas part when they hit the floor, the voices carry on and out the door. Everything you touch turns into gold. Like the angel you are, you laugh, creating a likeness in my chest. Your eyes, they penetrate. Your lips always made. That's when I got up and left. A beating heart in the microphone, a ticking clock in an empty home still tells of this time so long ago. Even though I've come so far, I know I've got so far to go. And any day now I'll explode. Like the angel you are, you laugh, creating a likeness in my chest. Your eyes, they penetrate. Your lips always made. That's when I got up and left.
All right, everybody, and we're back with still sitting here with Noah. So, Noah, your opponent, David Garcia, has just entered the race. I wanted to get some thoughts on what you feel about him and what you think about your opponent, David Garcia.
Well, first off, I think David Garcia is another exciting candidate, so I'm glad that he entered the race. I love having a worthy foe, and I consider him to be a worthy adversary. And I think that, just like in a sports tournament, I grew up as a wrestler, and
Really?
when you go to a wrestling tournament, yes. So
JV?
no, man, I was actually since you threw that out, I gotta say I was captain of the varsity wrestling team my freshman year, all 4 years.
Oh, wow.
So wrestling people, win or lose, it makes you better. It turns you into a better wrestler, every wrestling experience that you have. And when you go to a tournament and you've got to go through 8 brackets to get to the championship, like, sure, you're tired when you get to the end, but you're also better for having come through that gauntlet. So whichever one of us goes on to face Doug Ducey, we're going to be better for having faced each other first. Having said that, we are both Democrats, and we share a lot of the same policy issues. I'm not sure he's come out as clearly as I have about what my policies are, about what his policies are. So, like education, I think we've got the exact same plan on education. Certainly, I think when it comes to healthcare, we're going to be very similar in that regard. So,
Where would you guys differ, would you say?
yeah, so if we focus on where we differ, first off, I think I want to talk a little bit about resume, and then I'll also talk a little bit about issues. Resume-wise, David Garcia has mostly an academic resume. He is currently a professor, and he has also had government roles in the Department of Education. So I think his resume plays very strongly to that, and that's what he's going to be campaigning on. Alternatively, I have an education resume. I was a junior high school teacher and a college professor, but I also have experience as an entrepreneur and executive. So I think my experience is a little more well-rounded. And I think that's a valid question for voters to ask. Do I want somebody who has deep experience in a particular issue that I care about, or do I want somebody that has broad experience?
Well-rounded, yeah.
Yes. So I obviously think being well-rounded is an advantage, and I hope the voters see it that way too. I also think, when it comes to, I think Hispanic outreach is something that really matters in our community. David Garcia is Hispanic. He also is a fourth-generation Arizonan. So I think that's compelling. Alternatively, I actually speak Spanish, and I lived in Latin America, and so I think I have a lot to recommend me to the Hispanic community. I care very much about their issues. So I think, again, that's compelling. Is it more important to me to have somebody who is themselves Hispanic, or somebody who speaks Spanish and has the experience of living in Latin America? And that's for the voters to decide. It's not for me to say. I obviously think that having a Spanish-speaking governor is a more compelling proposition than having a Hispanic governor. I think that with our Mexico relations, actually being able to sit down with Mexican politicians and speak to them in their native language without the need of a translator is a very compelling thing. So that's my argument. When it comes to that's some of the resume stuff. When it comes to the issues, election reform is something that I'm very passionate about, and I don't think David Garcia has any intention of tackling election reform. If he does, I haven't heard him say anything about it. I'm obviously pro recreational marijuana legalization. I'm not sure where David falls on that. I also think that national spying on Arizona citizens is a problem, and that as a state we need to stand up for the rights of privacy of our citizens. And I haven't seen David say anything about concerns about federal surveillance.
Well, when it comes to candidacy, you're the ultimate transparency candidate.
Well, I believe that as a politician, I should be transparent. But I do not think that the NSA should gather data on every individual, right?
Their mother, yeah.
So there's as a public servant, my right to privacy, I am willing to give that up. And I hope that the people find that compelling. I give that up as an example, but I am willing to have far more limited transparency than the average private citizen will. But I think it's important that as a state, we fight for our citizens' rights to transparency, to privacy, and I don't think any other candidate has come out and said that that's important to them and that they would fight for it like I would.
I agree. I mean, it's, we all hear about stories about them collecting all our metadata, not all of our dick pics. I mean, that's what everyone hears. I mean, yeah, and I don't know if you heard about Obama handed Trump the biggest bloated NSA, program that's ever been, and now everyone's getting spied on, through your microwave.
Absolutely right. Exactly. So I mean, while the microwave thing is not true, what you bring up is the fact that unfortunately, spying is not a partisan issue. Like both parties have done it, and it's not even a George Bush issue. Like these are things that have been going on, basically since we invented telephones. Our government has been creeping that way. And if you are any kind of conservative or constitutional fundamentalist or anything like that, you recognize that our government was not supposed to be Big Brother in that way. And I am passionate about defending Arizonans against those kinds of programs.
You want to rub Arizona's feet? And serenade her with your guitar.
Exactly. And I think, and what I meant by that is precisely this. It is fighting for privacy, fighting for the right.
Yeah. So before we head out, is there anything you want to tell the listeners? Any projects you're working on? Any
Yes. And I'm glad saving this for last is probably the right place because it's got my call to action embedded in it. The legislature passed a bill this last session that was designed to squash citizens' initiatives. It makes it more difficult to circulate them in the first place, and it makes it easier to challenge them you might say frivolously.
Yeah.
So we have come up with a plan, and this is a nonpartisan thing. So I am on an action committee called Grassroots Citizens Concerned, and it is multi-partisan. The chair's a libertarian, the treasurer is independent. I'm the secretary. I'm a Democrat. I think we've literally got people like from the Green Party involved in the leadership. So it is a multi-party coalition of people who don't want citizens' initiatives to be squashed. There are so many things wrong with this bill, but one of the biggest one is that it is solving a non-problem. We do not have a problem with people turning in fake petitions. Like, it's not a thing that happens. And so trying to make it harder to turn in petitions is not is not a solution that we needed. And they'll try and say it's because, we're trying to prevent future fraud. It's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to punish people for passing the minimum wage law, and they're trying to make it harder to pass marijuana legalization through the initiative process. Right. All these sorts of things. So what we've put together is kind of the ultimate FU to the legislature. Because as the rules stand, you can put together a referendum on a bill. And what that means is, if from the date that the legislative session ends, which we expect to be this week, if we can collect about 100,000 signatures in 90 days, it will stop their bad law from going into effect, and it will put it on the next ballot so that the citizens can vote it down. So we're using petitions to preserve the right to petition. So it's kind of poetic in that regard. And the thing is, 100,000 signatures in 90 days is an incredibly aggressive goal. It's over 1,000 signatures a day. And so you need a lot of people, a lot of help to get it done. So with that being said, I would love to invite anyone who's listening who would be willing to, to gather 150 signatures takes about 2 to 4 hours. So our goal is to get, about 700 to 1,000 people to commit to collecting 150 signatures, spending 2 to 4 hours on this issue. And, as a grassroots effort, we can stop this law from ever going into effect. So if you're out there, you can go to refer2404.org. You can also check out Refer2404 on Facebook. You can also hit me up. All my contact information is on the campaign website, noahdyer.com. So if you want to preserve our, doing petitions, citizens initiatives, and referendums is already incredibly hard. It's a very difficult thing to do. If you just want to make sure that it doesn't get harder than it already is, please help us with this campaign.
Noah, thank you for sitting here with us on the Minutemen tonight. Appreciate it very much. It's always great to have you.
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
Noah Dyer, everybody. Noah Dyer for governor. Minutemen out.